702.
The Big Interview
With Bongani Bingwa.
18 after 7. It was a calling, was it not? They always refer to the teaching profession not just as a career or a job, but indeed a calling. So why are some teachers turning back on that calling? Mental health is a reason cited in a recent study coming out of Stellenbosch University, because many teachers say they simply can no longer cope. We have invited Dr. Heleen Hofmeyr, who is a senior researcher at Stellenbosch University and one of the authors of the Teacher Preference and Job Satisfaction in South Africa report. Dr. Hofmeyr, very good morning to you and welcome to 702 Breakfast. Thanks for your time.
Hi, Bongani. Thanks for having me.
Teachers are turning back on their calling because of mental health issues?
That's true. Well, at least based on the findings of our study. So we did a survey nationally where we got about 1,500 responses from teachers. And half of them actually said that in the next 10 years, they're planning on leaving the profession. So this is what's kind of called early retirement in the policy documents. And you know, while we don't have a nationally representative sample, so we can't say this is definitely 50% of teachers are going to leave, I think that finding really points to a deep problem that we have in the teaching profession, where teachers feel overworked, stressed, and in a lot of senses really like they are tasked with an impossible job.
Just give us a sense of what your research shows you in terms of what leads to these stresses and that feeling of burnout from our teachers.
Yeah, so our study kind of consisted of two parts. The first was a survey of 1,500 teachers, and that really was just aimed at understanding teacher job satisfaction and what makes certain, teachers move to certain provinces or certain schools. And there we weren't really concerned with identifying mental health issues. But then in the second part of our study, we did follow-up telephonic interviews with 80 teachers. And there it really became evident that we are sitting with a deeper problem than just, what's called job satisfaction. We're sitting with a real kind of mental health problem, which we highlight in our report. Some of the factors that we highlight in the report, one of them, I think, I spoke about the impossibility of a teacher's task. We have a system that allows learners to progress to the next grade without acquiring the mastery of the skills that are required in that grade. So many teachers told us, they're sitting in a situation where they're teaching a grade 8 class, for example, and their job is to teach maths.
Yeah.
But they told us many of the learners can't read. And so now they are forced to follow the curriculum, which is a very structured, it's called strong-paced curriculum, which they're called annual teaching plans. I encourage your listeners to go look them up because they're quite interesting. It will say today is week 3 of term 4 and it's day 4 and this is what you have to cover in your lesson today. But they're faced with a class of maybe the majority of learners are not at grade level. So it's this tension really of having to cover a curriculum while knowing that your learners are not at that level. And I think that causes a real sense of disengagement among teachers. I mean, anybody can imagine if you're whatever your job is, if you feel like you're not having an impact and what you're doing really is to some extent pointless because you're not having the effect that you really know that you're supposed to be having, I think that really demoralizes a lot of teachers. So that's the one aspect. But the second aspect that teachers spoke to us about in our interview, and this was really concerning, and I don't think it's acknowledged enough by our education department, but also broader society, is the trauma that learners are exposed to and that they enter school with. Children their brains respond to being exposed to trauma. Some research shows that by the age of 17, 4 in 10 children in South Africa have experienced a traumatic event. Now, the neuroscience is starting to show us that affects children's ability to learn. So I think we really need to start acknowledging the fact that our society is a traumatized one and the learners are experiencing that and they're coming to school with that. And our teacher training initiatives don't acknowledge that. There are trauma-informed teaching strategies. One of the things that the teachers mentioned was this issue of they experience kind of oppositional behavior from learners, especially in high school. And it really creates this very unpleasant situation that sometimes goes over into violence, where there's just a conflict between learners and teachers, and it really speaks to kind of broader societal issues that learners are not, it's not dealt with, and the teachers are the ones who end up having to deal with the outcomes of that in their classes, when really their jobs are supposed to be teaching, not being counselors or mental health professionals, which is not what they're trained for.
Or security guards. Dr. Heleen Hofmeyr, appreciate your time. Senior researcher at Stellenbosch University. Just think about some of the things she's highlighting there. They're teaching kids. They have to stick to a rigid teaching plan when the kids don't have the basics for that plan. So you might as well be teaching Japanese in Ngayizivele High School, right? Imagine you just walk into a classroom full of Zulu speakers and you start speaking to them in Japanese. That's exactly what these teachers are faced with, quite apart from the violence between the learners themselves and violence to the teachers. And of course, these kids come into these classrooms full of traumas because of the society in which they live. Would you teach? If you're a teacher, I'd love to hear your perspective and what keeps you going when so many are now turning their back on the profession.
702
The Big Interview
with Bongani Bingwa.
If ever there was a relentless pursuit of justice, it is certainly the story and the courage of Lukhanyo Calata. Nearly 4 decades after one of apartheid's darkest chapters, the Cradock 4 inquest continues to unearth painful truths buried deep in South African history. Yesterday, the former apartheid spy, Craig Williamson, took to the stand, firmly rejecting as absurd and ludicrous the allegations made at the Truth and Reconciliation Commission by the late security branch officer, Lieutenant Jaap van Jaarsveld, who accused him of ordering the assassination of the Cradock 4, Matthew Goniwe and his comrades, the murders of Fort Calata, Stelo Mhlawuli, Sparrow Mkhonto and Matthew Goniwe, those 4 anti-apartheid activists who were abducted, tortured and burnt to death by the apartheid police. Perhaps it's a story we would have moved away from, but for the relentless quest for justice by the son of Fort Calata, Lukhanyo, who joins us now. Lukhanyo Calata, thank you so much for your time and welcome to 702 Breakfast.
Good morning, sir, and thank you for having me.
You've been on this quest, this pursuit for justice to try and get some sense of what happened to your father. How difficult is it for you to sit through this testimony, and what has struck you about the proceedings so far?
It hasn't really been difficult, emotionally, of course, but I think we're more interested in finally getting a semblance of truth. So, we have to put on our big boy pants and go to court and be prepared to sit and listen to sometimes what we know is completely untrue. It's the last couple of days have been very good for us, Bongani, just simply because we've had someone like Craig Williamson come to testify. We've had someone like General Gerrit Erasmus come to give testimony. Today we will have Joffel van der Westhuizen, who was the one that ordered or dictated the military signal. This is the first time that these people are actually being held accountable for their roles, in the murders of the Cradock 4. So it's a tough week, but good week.
Is it wrong for me as just an observer to say I don't sense any contrition? I think these men are as unrepentant as they ever were. What's your feeling?
No, I agree with you 100%. And, their demeanor in court and what we're seeing playing out in court is really just a continuation of that sense of entitlement, sense of arrogance. And it is I suppose, one of the many ways in which the ANC government has failed us. Because had these matters been taken care of 20 years ago, these people would have been charged, they would have most likely been convicted of their crimes, and they would have spent some time in jail. But now they're in their late 70s, in their late 80s, And, they're basically just saying, I don't recall, I deny that, without a semblance of understanding what we have had to go through to get to this place that we are with them today. So there's no remorse from them, none whatsoever.
And all of this despite overwhelming historical evidence.
Indeed. And then we have to ask ourselves, if all of this information had been there right from the get-go, why were they not prosecuted? Why was Eric Taylor, the man who actually was denied amnesty by the TRC for the actual murder of my father, why was he never prosecuted? Why are some of these people that were part of the conspiracy, someone like Joffel van der Westhuizen, why was he never prosecuted?
Why do you think they weren't prosecuted?
Because the ANC had made a deal with these former apartheid generals and former National Party leaders that there won't be any prosecutions for the TRC-related murders, because that would then protect the ANC guys from being prosecuted for some of the crimes that they had committed. So there was an actual deal in place.
So your father and his comrades were the sacrificial lambs.
Basically, the ANC used my father, their sacrifice, and sold them out. That's what they did, because by saying they were the sacrificial lambs, we kind of we gloss over it, we glaze it a little bit, when the reality was that the ANC sold out their sacrifice, and they protected themselves at the expense of the people that actually paid the ultimate price for the that we enjoy today.
There's some nobility in the idea of a sacrifice, isn't there? This was a betrayal, straight and simple. Lukhanyo Calata, appreciate your time. Good luck to you. There's still more testimony to come. It's still a long road yet, and we'll catch up with you every now and again just to see how things are unfolding. The son there of Fort Calata making it very clear that in his mind, his father and his comrades weren't just sacrificial lambs, they were sold out.
Current events, developing stories,
Tough questions.
your voice making a difference.
This is Breakfast with Bongani Bingwa.